Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. We have some breaking news, a massive featherweight fight announcement. We are getting Josh Emmett versus Ilia Topuria. They will headline a UFC Fight Night card on June 17th, and this is going to be my reaction and early prediction for this amazing featherweight matchup. And my reaction to this news is I am so excited we finally got some Ilia Topuria fight news, because Topuria is a guy in the featherweight division who I've been very high on for a long time, and a lot of people are very high on. And I was wondering, after he absolutely dominated Bryce Mitchell, was it going to be one of those situations where you had the higher ranked guys at featherweight squatting on their ranking, refusing to fight Topuria, and then eventually we were going to settle with something, that was less than optimal in terms of the next step in Topuria's career? But this fight is perfect. This fight is absolutely perfect. I love Josh Emmett versus Ilia Topuria, and I love that it's a main event. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But I was worried because Brian Ortega was kind of the name that was floating out there for a while. Topuria called him out after he beat Bryce Mitchell at UFC 282. And it seemed like, okay, that's the fight to make. I thought that made a lot of sense. And then recently he had a clip come from the Schmo interview with Brian Ortega, where Ortega's like, I'm not even training yet, and he hasn't even beaten anyone yet. And it just seemed like Brian Ortega was going to try to avoid a fight with Ilia Topuria. And he was like, I'll humble him if I have to, but he needs to beat someone top ranked. Yeah, I'm in the top 5. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we don't have to deal with that anymore, because Josh Emmett's the type of guy, he's not going to turn down a fight. Okay, he's 38 years old. He's coming off a loss to Yair Rodriguez where he fought for an interim title. But he's not the type of guy who's going to try to use some type of leverage that doesn't exist to try to turn down fighting an up-and-coming contender within the featherweight division. And honestly, I think Josh Emmett stylistically is a more difficult matchup for Ilia Topuria than Brian Ortega was. And we'll talk about, my prediction for this fight in a little bit. But you have Josh Emmett who, he has unbelievable power. He has decent striking, and he has very good wrestling as well. He doesn't mix in the offensive wrestling, but he has very good defensive wrestling. It's not easy to take him down. And Josh Emmett, I know a lot of people like to shit on him and, say, oh, Josh Emmett has no personality. We don't care about him. Josh Emmett's rarely in a boring fight, okay? The Yair Rodriguez fight was incredible. That was just back at UFC 284 in early February, so he was kind of getting a quick turnaround. The Calvin Kattar fight was an entertaining fight. Josh Emmett's been very exciting throughout his career. But also, I will have to say for Josh Emmett, he could arguably be on a 3-fight losing streak. As crazy as that sounds, he lost to Yair Rodriguez clean in his last fight. The fight before that against Calvin Kattar, he won via split decision. I thought he lost that fight. I thought Calvin Kattar outstruck him, and I thought Josh Emmett essentially won that fight punching the forearms of Calvin Kattar. And then the fight before that against Dan Ige was razor close. I gave it to Dan Ige. I didn't think it was a robbery. I didn't think it was as clear as the Calvin Kattar win. But I still thought Dan Ige could have won that fight against Josh Emmett. So it's a weird situation where Josh Emmett's only on a 1-fight losing streak. He's won 5 out of his last 6. And he's still at the top of the rankings. He's sitting at number 5 currently in the rankings. Topuria is sitting at number 9 currently. So this kind of makes sense because Josh Emmett just lost his fight. And some of these guys, towards the top of the division, when you lose a fight, you kind of have to defend your ranking. You can't just squat on it and hope to get another top-ranked fight and just have recycled kind of contenders time after time, where Brian Ortega will lose and then Emmett will lose, and then they'll fight each other, and then someone will get a win and just recycle the same guys in the top 5 over and over and over again. Like a lot of people were complaining that was happening at lightweight for a bit until, finally we seen like Beneil Dariush take on Mateusz Gamrot, and Justin Gaethje recently fought Rafael Fiziev. I'm so glad we're not having that situation at featherweight. And this fight is very important for both guys. Honestly, this is a must-win for both guys because Ilia Topuria, he's kind of getting a bit of hype behind him. And a lot of people outside of just hardcore fans are starting to take notice of Ilia Topuria. And this is his massive test. This is his massive step up in competition. Josh Emmett is better than any fighter Ilia Topuria has ever faced. And I know Ilia Topuria went out there and made Bryce Mitchell look like an easy fight, but Josh Emmett is a whole nother beast, and he is a proven elite fighter at featherweight. I know some people are going to say, oh, he's so boring and this and that. He has great power. He has good striking. He has good defensive wrestling. And he's a good fighter. Even though me personally saying he lost the last 3 fights, still he went out there, had a great fight against Shane Burgos. He went out there and destroyed Mirsad Bektic. He went out there, brutalized Michael Johnson. I know these aren't the greatest wins, but Josh Emmett is still a quality fighter in the division. And he hurt Yair Rodriguez badly in the first round at UFC 284. Yair Rodriguez is now going to go on to fight Alexander Volkanovski. So this is just a guy that is a steep test for Ilia Topuria. And Topuria has to pass this. Otherwise, people are going to say, oh, Josh Emmett proved that Topuria is a fraud. You know, a statement that goes around quite a bit is, you know, fill in the name, got exposed. And if Ilia Topuria loses this fight, that's what everyone's going to be saying about him. And for Josh Emmett, he's only on a one-fight losing streak, but guess what? He's 38 years old. In this sport, the young perpetually eat the old. And, you know, Josh Emmett is now getting an absolute up-and-coming savage in Ilia Topuria. And if he loses this fight, I mean, who are they going to feed him to next? Where is he going to drop to in the rankings? I already don't think Josh Emmett's ever going to be able to make another title run within the featherweight division. But if he wants to have a chance to, he has to go out there and get an impressive win over Ilia Topuria, who is so good, much younger, much faster. And Topuria, I think, is more well-rounded. Honestly, I think Josh Emmett is well-rounded. But I think Topuria, I mean, people for some reason just think he's a striker. He's primarily a grappler, and he's a jiu-jitsu guy who has great submissions. And for some reason, people just think he's a striker and a knockout guy. That's how good Topuria is, and that's how well-rounded Topuria is. Now, as far as the Ilia Topuria-Brian Ortega fight, I thought that fight stylistically was an easier matchup for Ilia Topuria because Brian Ortega doesn't have the best striking. He wants to take you down and look for a submission. But he doesn't have the best offensive wrestling. You know, even in the Volkanovski fight, when he came close to the submissions, it was because Volkanovski kind of, you know, was off balance. He got hit by Brian Ortega, but it was kind of a slip. It wasn't necessarily getting dropped, even though I know some people are probably going to say that in the comments. And he capitalized on it and looked for a guillotine. I don't know how Volkanovski got out of it. But Brian Ortega, he looks for the submission primarily in his fights. Topuria has elite-level submission skills, and he has elite-level jiu-jitsu, and he has very good ground game, and he's a very good striker, and he's a power puncher as well. But Topuria, again, a lot of people think of him as a striker. Of his 13 wins, he's undefeated, 13-0. 8 of them are wins by submission. People were saying Bryce Mitchell's going to go out there, wrestle him, take him down, and submit him. Topuria went out there, beat him up on the feet, out-grappled him, ragdolled him in that second round, and eventually found an arm triangle against Bryce Mitchell. I know Bryce Mitchell, you know, said he had the flu, and that's why he got submitted by Topuria. He probably said it was because the earth was flat as well. But Ilia Topuria went out there and made quick work of Bryce Mitchell. And in that second round, when he was ragdolling him in the grappling exchanges, I was thinking, you know what? Bryce Mitchell, I mean, he has a very good ground game, but Topuria just proved, I was already high on his ground game, but Topuria proved that his offensive grappling in terms of just getting positionings and getting takedowns just showed me that it was on another level than I even thought it was on, because Bryce Mitchell's relentless, has good offensive wrestling and defensive wrestling himself. So it was this phenomenal performance, and I just couldn't see a scenario where Brian Ortega got Topuria down and submitted him. And Ortega doesn't have great offensive wrestling. He doesn't have a great ability to close the distance. He's not particularly fast. Don't get me wrong. Ortega's a very skilled fighter. But I just found it hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that Ortega would have been able to get Topuria down, grapple him, and look for a submission. I don't think it would have happened. Where in the Josh Emmett fight, Josh Emmett has one-punch KO power. He can put any man out. And he also has good defensive wrestling and good offensive wrestling. Now, I don't think he's going to look to offensively wrestle against Topuria. He doesn't really offensively wrestle against anyone. He did a little bit against, you know, Yair Rodriguez, but typically he's not really offensive wrestling against anyone. And he's not going to do it against Topuria because of the jiu-jitsu and because of the submission threat. So they're going to be standing. And maybe Topuria, maybe he gets outstruck by Josh Emmett. I'm not saying necessarily that's the case. It's going to be very hard to take Josh Emmett down. Josh Emmett is massive. I think he's much bigger. I think size-wise, I think Josh Emmett is much bigger than Ilia Topuria. And I think it's going to be tough. If Topuria is getting outstruck on the feet, I think it's going to be tough for him to change the fight and take Josh Emmett down. But it's a very interesting matchup. It's a very compelling matchup. And the reason I am so happy that this is a main event of a fight night card is because we get this fight 5 rounds. This fight absolutely needed to be 5 rounds. Because think about the stakes. It's Josh Emmett's career on the line. Also, Topuria, if he beats Josh Emmett, he proves himself as a legit top 5 talent in the featherweight division, and he puts himself right in title contention. Volkanovski versus Yair, after that fight, whoever wins that fight, who's going to be next? It's probably going to be Ilia Topuria if he's able to defeat Josh Emmett in June. That's how big this fight is for Ilia Topuria. As far as an early prediction, I have to go Ilia Topuria. I don't know how he's going to win, but I just feel like he's more well-rounded. I feel like he's faster. I feel like he's younger. Josh Emmett just got submitted by Yair Rodriguez, and he was getting lit up with kicks by Yair Rodriguez. And I know Topuria isn't as a dynamic of kicker as someone like Yair, but Topuria has great power in his hands, and he has amazing submission skills and amazing jiu-jitsu. And honestly, what I see probably happening in this fight is I see Topuria probably just hitting Josh Emmett with a massive shot. Maybe Josh Emmett trying to survive, look for a takedown, or maybe, he tries to kind of move away and avoid getting finished because Topuria has great finishing instinct. Maybe slipping, falling to the ground, and then Topuria gets on top of him and finds a finish, whether it's a guillotine off of like a sloppy takedown attempt from Josh Emmett, or maybe just in a scramble, gets him down, gets an arm triangle, something along those lines. I just think Topuria has everything on his side. He has speed, he has jiu-jitsu, he has youth, and I just think out there going against Josh Emmett, who arguably lost his last 3 fights, I just think Topuria will be able to get it done in every single fight out. And this is one main factor that I look at every time I look at a guy and I say, okay, this guy's a future contender. This guy's a future champion. Ilia Topuria, every single time out, he looks better and better and better. I mean, Topuria in his last fight against Bryce Mitchell looked incredible. The fight before that against Jai Herbert in the lightweight division, Jai Herbert was much bigger than him, hurt him badly. He was able to survive and then go out there in the second round and finish Jai Herbert himself. The fight before that against Ryan Hall, everyone was on Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall's so good. And Joe Rogan was like in awe at Ryan Hall kind of flopping around on the ground. And Topuria brutally finished him because he just kept sliding around on the ground and leaving himself susceptible. Topuria just smashed him and KO'd him, and it was a brutal finish. And I just think in this fight, Topuria is going to be able to get it done. I think he's more well-rounded. I think the striking, Josh Emmett's very good on the feet as well and has very good power. But unless Josh Emmett goes out there and really clips Ilia Topuria and just puts him to sleep, I don't see many more avenues to victory. I think Topuria can win a decision. I think Topuria can KO or TKO Josh Emmett. And I definitely believe that Ilia Topuria can submit Josh Emmett. I know Josh Emmett, he was hurt and getting lit up with kicks when he eventually got submitted by Yair Rodriguez. But I think Ilia Topuria has better submission game than Yair Rodriguez, even though Yair Rodriguez, honestly, his submission game has leveled up. A lot of people don't give him credit for, I know it wasn't technically a submission, but it was basically a submission against Brian Ortega. He got Brian Ortega's arm in a weird spot. Ortega tried to pull it out and injured his shoulder in that fight. And Yair Rodriguez basically got no credit for that. So I think Yair's very good on the ground as well, but I think Topuria is a little bit better in terms of his offensive jiu-jitsu and his submission game. And I just think eventually at some point, whether it's a slip, whether he gets clocked and hurt and he looks for a sloppy takedown and gets guillotined, I think Ilia Topuria will find a way to get it done and propel himself right into title discussion. Imagine the winner of Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez, whoever wins, their next fight is probably going to be Ilia Topuria if he is able to defeat Josh Emmett. So I'm really looking forward to this fight, and I'm also curious, how is Ilia Topuria's 5-round cardio? Josh Emmett's very durable as well. He hasn't been finished. He's been finished twice in his entire MMA career, once by knockout and once by submission. And he hasn't been KO'd since all the way back in 2018 against Jeremy Stevens. So if Josh Emmett, even if he's losing, but if he's able to keep the fight competitive and relatively close, how is Topuria's cardio going to look if we get to that 3rd, 4th, and 5th round? Because Topuria has never seen championship rounds in his entire career. And also Topuria, sometimes he can be overly aggressive and start swinging for the fences and looking for knockouts and headhunting himself. So this fight's going to answer a lot of questions about Ilia Topuria. That's why I'm really looking forward to it. I do think the Brian Ortega fight would have been very interesting as well, but I do think Josh Emmett is a little bit more tougher test stylistically wise for Ilia Topuria than Brian Ortega was. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.